and thank you for joining us. My name is Shlomo Soroka, and I serve as the Director of Government Affairs for Agudath Israel of Illinois. I want to thank the rabbi and the synagogue for hosting us this morning, and I want to ask you that for security purposes, we ask that you not publicize the name or location of the synagogue if possible. I also want to thank other organizations within the Jewish community that have come here to join us this morning, notably the Chicago Rabbinical Council, the Anti-Defamation League, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and Stand With Us, as well as elected officials. Our alderman couldn't make it, but her chief of staff is here, 50th Ward Alderman Deborah Silverstein, chief of staff, as well as our 50th Ward committeeman. My job as Director of Government Affairs for Agudath Israel is to represent the interests of the Orthodox Jewish community, including approximately 20,000 community members that live in this area. We are a marginalized community that is often mischaracterized, misunderstood, and ignored. The Jewish people have been plagued by the scourge of anti-Semitism for millennia and have been subject to violent persecution since time immemorial. Almost all of us are descendants of immigrants who came to this country to flee persecution and oppression. Many of us, myself included, are children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors who came to these shores hoping to rebuild their lives here. And rebuilt we have. We have a beautiful, thriving community that is devoted to our traditions, religious observance, and Torah values. While anti-Semitism, or to be more accurate, Jew hatred, is nothing new, its global resurgence is deeply alarming, and what has transpired in our area is particularly frightening. For years, we have been sounding the alarm bells. We said Jew hatred is becoming more prevalent and could lead to violence. And David from the ADL will speak to some of those statistics. We also have said that members of the Jewish community, of the Orthodox Jewish community, are the most vulnerable to violent attacks. We are easily identifiable as Jews, and because we can't drive on Shabbos, which is the Jewish Sabbath, or on Jewish holidays, we need to live within walking distance of our synagogues, so we aren't hard to find. The overwhelming majority of Orthodox Jews in this state are concentrated in this area. This past Shabbos, our worst fears were realized when a member of our community was shot while walking to synagogue. It appears to be an attempted murder motivated by Jew hatred. We are grateful for the brave members of the Chicago Police Department and emergency first responders who put themselves in harm's way to treat the victim and neutralize the offender. But it is not realistic or fair to expect us to simply shrug off this incident as something isolated. And there are also a lot of legitimate questions surrounding the circumstances that remain unanswered. We understand the importance of being patient while allowing local and federal investigators to do their jobs. But we can do better in sharing relevant information instead of allowing people to draw their own conclusions, which only serves to increase angst and anger. Are we disappointed that hate crime charges weren't filed? Yeah, obviously we are. But we also understand that the investigation is ongoing and that there can be additional charges tacked on later, which means that we will be watching the state's attorney's office closely as time goes on. There is no room whatsoever for political considerations. And while we also understand that there are legalities and hate crimes aren't easily prosecuted, we expect that every effort is made to prosecute a hate crime for what it is. And lastly, what's also important is to understand is that whether or not this is prosecuted as a hate crime, that is essentially irrelevant. It's an irrelevant technicality in terms of how we are experiencing what transpired. Yes, we just experienced an act of violence that strikes at the heart of our communal family. We as a community celebrate joyous occasions together, we mourn tragedies together, and we will fight for our safety together as well. That is why we are here today. I would now like to call up the Executive Director of the Chicago Rabbinical Council, Rabbi Levi Mostovsky.
Thank you, Shlomo. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. First of all, thank you to the Chicago Police Department and to all parts of law enforcement that have been working diligently always to keep us safe and to work with us looking into this case, and to all those involved in prosecuting this case. We're immensely appreciative to you for coming today, for hearing what we need to say. As a community, we are scared. As a community of faith, we have faith in God. but we are scared. For us, this shooting a few days ago was not just another act of violence. It wasn't just another shooting on the streets of Chicago. When a visibly Jewish individual in an otherwise placid neighborhood is shot unprovoked on his way to synagogue, we are terrorized. Even when law enforcement rightly says that there are no known credible threats to our safety, we credibly feel threatened. What may be classified as a lone wolf attack, we recognize to be part of a global pattern of attacks, a chain of individual attacks tied by ideology that have unfortunately only increased since October 7th. This was not just another shooting. We hear the global calls for attacks on Jews wherever we may be, even here in Chicago. We have been watching closely anti-Semitic attacks proliferate around the world. And we are scared. Our community of faith is looking to you, to law enforcement, to the media, to our neighbors, to all people of good faith, to come together and not accept anti-Semitic attacks as something that we can accept. Help us as a community, help us as your neighbors, and don't let this violence be tolerated. We are scared, but we have faith, and we thank you for coming out today, and again, we appreciate all the work of the Chicago Police Department and law enforcement, and we look forward to seeing this case prosecuted as it should be. Thank you.
I'd like to call up David Goldenberg from the Anti-Defamation League Midwest region.
Good morning. My name is David Goldenberg. I'm the Midwest Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. A member of Chicago's Orthodox community was shot and injured on Saturday while walking to synagogue in West Rogers Park, Chicago's most populous Jewish neighborhood. The charges filed yesterday against the suspect are a good start, but that's all they are, a good start. First, as others have said, we deeply appreciate the work that's being done by the Chicago Police Department and other law enforcement agencies participating in the investigation. And we urge in the strongest terms possible that CPD and others conduct a thorough investigation into the motives of these heinous crimes and that charges be added as appropriate. I have been involved in literally dozens of hate crimes investigations over the last few years, and I know that sometimes we need to be patient if we want the charges to stick, even when our lived experiences make it seemingly clear and obvious. Second, I urge our own community, regardless of the anger, the fear, the exhaustion, and the exasperation we all feel, myself included, to not use this incident as an excuse to spread hate toward others. I know that there will be some in the Jewish community who will criticize me for just saying that. I've seen the social media posts, the WhatsApp posts, the chats. I've heard the misinformation and rumors. Simply put, engaging in lashon hara, or evil speech, will not make the situation better. It will not prevent the next attack or help the victim recover any quicker. It might feel good, but it will only pour gasoline on an already raging fire. As a Jewish community, we know the impact that spreading lies about Jews has had on the safety of our community. We saw it firsthand when CARE's executive director falsely stated that the landlord who killed young Wadea and attacked his mother was Jewish. Media didn't ask questions, it printed the hearsay, and we all now know that the landlord was in fact not Jewish. Still, the damage was done, and another round of threats ensued. We shouldn't do the same today or ever. And finally, CPD's investigation continues. As CPD's investigation continues, let's be clear. For the Jewish community, as Shlomo said, Saturday's crime feels like a hate crime regardless of where the investigation lands. Chicago's Jewish community has been rocked, and Saturday's shooting is just the latest our community has been forced to overcome. As some of you reported on, the FBI released earlier this month its most recent data on hate crimes in the United States. Despite Jews comprising only about 2% of the US population, anti-Semitic incidents accounted for over 15% of all hate crimes in the United States in 2023 and made up 68% of all religion-based hate crimes during the same time. Also, ADL has tracked a near 300% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the city of Chicago over the last year compared to the year before. Right here in West Rogers Park, the Jewish community has faced an onslaught of anti-Semitism over the last few years. Synagogues have been swatted and vandalized. Jewish community members have been assaulted and harassed, not just on Saturday, but previously with anti-Semitic slurs and threats. And since October 7th, anti-Israel protests across the city have called for violence against Jews. All of this is happening against a backdrop of a political and civic and educational environment in which here in Chicago that has become openly hostile toward Jews. We have a mayor, to my knowledge, who has not publicly acknowledged Saturday's shooting. City council members who regularly participate in rallies that celebrate violence against Jews. And media outlets who have barely reported on this shooting, notwithstanding the last 24 hours. And when they were, the fact that a Jewish man was shot was buried beneath the fact that this individual shot at police and first responders. Chicago's Jewish community has experienced significant trauma in recent years, and we know that we are not the only community feeling it. But here in our community, Saturday's shooting of an Orthodox community member walking to Shabbat services was the realization of the worst fear held by many, and that is not okay. Now is the time for leaders from across communities, across our great city, to support the Jewish community. We need it, regardless of what CPD's investigation ultimately uncovers.
Thank you, David. If anybody has questions,
For David, is there any specific stats you guys have been tracking since the October 7th attack? Anything like attacks on Jews or anti-Semitism?
Yeah. So ADL's tracked here in the city of Chicago. I'll start small and go bigger. In the city of Chicago, a near 300% increase in anti-Semitic incidents from, it would have been October 7th, 2023 to September 30th, 2024, compared to the same time the year before. Nationally, ADL has tracked over 10,000 incidents of anti-Semitism across the country in that same time period, which is almost as much, which is almost as many acts of anti-Semitism, and we're talking acts of harassment, vandalism, and assault, almost as much as we tracked the 2 years prior to, combined. Sorry, whatever camera I just hit.
Have you been in contact with the victim, his family? We were told that he often walks to services with his children, or they were with him at this time. Have you been in contact with him? How is he doing? How is his family doing?
I am in contact with him. He's a friend. I spoke to him yesterday. We communicated a number of times yesterday. I spoke to his family this morning, and he's going to be okay by literally a miracle. But he's got a road ahead of him, and his family has a road ahead, and really the entire community does as well.
Before we get further, can you spell your names? David, you don't have to, but if you guys can spell your names in titles, that'd be great.
First name is Shlomo, that's spelled S-H-L-O-M-O, no S-C-H. And last name is S-O-R-O-K-A, and the title is Director of Government Affairs for Agudath Israel of Illinois. Agudath is A-G-U-D-A-T-H. Israel is in the country.
Rabbi Levi Mostovsky, Levi, and Mostovsky is Mostofsky, the Executive Director of the Chicago Rabbinical Council. Thank you.
And David, would you mind spelling your name?
Yeah, no problem. It's David Goldenberg, D-A-V-I-D, Goldenberg, and I'm the Midwest Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL.
I also want to acknowledge the presence, I neglected to mention before, of State Representative Kevin Olicle, 16th District. Any other questions?
Are you in regular dialogue with the Chicago Police Department? I mean, obviously, many of you expressed appreciation for the work they're doing, but you want to see more being done. What is the communication like?
We actually have excellent lines of communication open. I spoke to the commander of the 24th District yesterday. I'm in regular contact with her and members of her team. They also have a unit that's called the Place of Worship Advisory Team. Did I?
How's that?
Yeah.
Place of worship.
So they, and they know our community inside and out. We also had a meeting with Superintendent Snelling on Sunday afternoon. So they have kept those lines of communication open and have ensured that there is dialogue. And they have really gone above and beyond to try to make sure that we are safe. That's not to say that we don't need additional resources. If you go back a few years ago, I don't know if there was any synagogue that had locks on the door and security guards, and now there's virtually not a synagogue in the neighborhood that doesn't have a security code that you need to know to get in, and security guards during times of prayer, especially on Shabbos, on Sabbath, and the Jewish holidays. And the Chicago Police Department needs more resources themselves. They're spread very thin, so they do need more resources, and we'll advocate for that. We're also grateful for the state of Illinois that they have provided a supplemental program to the federal nonprofit security program that has enabled a lot of our places of worship to do target hardening and to pay for some of the expenses that comes with ensuring the safety of our community, but it's still unfortunately not enough.
Shlomo, can I just add something to that? Sure. Just important to note too that nonprofit security grant program that Shlomo was talking about, mosques, churches, other religious institutions have taken advantage of it and can receive that funding. So I think that's an important piece. The other piece that Shlomo mentioned about the fact that you have we have guards and locked doors and all these different things and buildings that have been hardened and new vestibules that have been put in there to have essentially the term is man trap. So the idea that you can get in and get out, but you can't get into the second door, right? So from a security perspective, you can trap someone in. I just want to take a moment to explain how messed up that is. Like, my children and my family will, and here's the thing, it doesn't matter if you're Orthodox, if you're Reform, if you're conservative, if you're Reconstructionist across the Jewish spectrum. The experience is the same. Our children will not walk into a synagogue on a Shabbat service or a religious holiday without being greeted by an armed security guard. That's the Jewish experience in America today. My children, I remember when I was a kid, you kind of came and went in a synagogue, the door was just open, you walked in, you had a good time, right? My kids will never have that experience today. And in their entire life, they will never have that experience. And our partners at the Jewish Federation often talk about, who provide social services in the city of Chicago, they talk about the amount of money we spend in the Jewish community on community security that is not being spent on feeding people, clothing people, putting a roof over their head, educating them. So if we think about that, and the Jewish experience today, that's what it is. And it's not unfounded, and it's not irrational. It is based on our lived experiences. And the piece of it that I'll add to it is what Shlomo was talking about. The reason CPD knows the Jewish community so well is because it has to know the Jewish community so well. Not just in traditional community policing that you would expect in any neighborhood, but because of the elevated threat that the Jewish community faces day in and day out. That is not how anyone should ever have to live their life. Do you want to recognize Ron?
Chicago police said that they were devoting more resources, more patrols this and since October. Are you seeing evidence of that?
We do. We do see more of a presence. There's always people that want to see more. And sometimes there are unmarked cars, so it's not necessarily as obvious. But I know that the Chicago Police Department is doing their best. Again, if they would have more resources, they would provide more resources. I also want to acknowledge our state senator who just walked in, Senator Villavallen. Thank you.
But still, there's fear.
There's a visceral fear in the community, a visceral fear. I mean, you have somebody who was shot in the back on his way to synagogue. And this was something that we were fearful about before, but now that it's a reality, there's a visceral fear. And nobody should have to walk around in their own neighborhoods with their family on the way to synagogue. I mean, I'll share a detail that has not been reported in the press. The victim of this crime, every single week when he goes to synagogue, he takes his girls with him, his little girls. And this particular week, he decided to go by himself, and his little girls weren't with him. Could you imagine what would have happened if those little girls were with him? Well, just think about that for a moment. You all have families. You have brothers, you have sisters, maybe you have children, you have parents. This is where we live. We should be able to feel safe in our own neighborhoods, and that's not the case right now.
May I say something? Thank you. Hi, thank you. I just want to also, I'm Allison Pierce-Slovan from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and thank you to my colleagues. But I also want to point out that we do talk about the synagogues and the fear, and it's real. But we're not mentioning what's going on in the other areas as well. What's going on in our high schools? We talk about, everybody knows what happened in the universities and the encampments, but we're dealing with a lot of Jew hatred in the high schools. We're dealing with it in the grade schools. We're dealing with it in the parks, in the suburbs, where children are playing in the park and they have a yarmulke on, which just makes you understand that they're a Jew, and they're being spit on and they're being called dirty Jew. There was a park in a suburb, I won't name the suburb, where children were playing on the monkey bars, and other students came up to them and said, you can't come here because this is Gaza and you aren't allowed. So Jews are feeling it in many, many areas, and our schools also are under armed guard. Children should not have to go to school and not feel safe unless there is a security guard letting them in and out. So the threat is real, and we have to remember what had just happened years ago. What was the anniversary? The Tree of Life shooting. This is America. Everybody should feel safe in America, and that's the job of everybody and all of our leaders to ensure that everyone feels safe and that Jew hatred is real, and we need to stop it.
Hi, my name is Yossi Held. I'm the Midwest Executive Director for Stand With Us. Just adding on to what was already said about the statistics of anti-Semitism, those rates, those increases are felt most prominently on college campuses, and as Allison just mentioned, in the K through 12th grade space. And so as targets, especially in the Orthodox community where boys wear yarmulkes and women and girls dress a certain way, modestly, they have a target on their back. And so when that fear and that terror is it comes to life through a shooting, it is felt so much closer to home in this community especially, but as well as on campuses, because students just don't feel comfortable expressing themselves Jewishly, and that's something that most other faiths don't have to experience and live with day to day, especially in a post-October 7th world where the rates of anti-Semitism globally have increased multiples of 100%. So it's a horrible thing that we're experiencing, and we really call on our elected officials to do more, especially the mayor of the city. We can say it over and over again, and we have been saying it over and over again since October 7th. We need our mayor to step up, do more, acknowledge what is happening here in Chicago and around Metro Chicago, and put his mouth and his purse of the city and give our Chicago Police Department more resources so they can do their jobs and do their jobs well. Thank you.
Have any of you had conversations with the mayor's office at all? Have you reached out? Have they reached out?
I have not spoken to the mayor since this incident took place. We have had some conversations a number of months ago, but I haven't heard anything from him since. I hope to hear from him.
No. He doesn't return calls.
So you have reached out, he has not returned his calls?
At least 3 times in the last 6 months. Personally.
What about the last few days?
No. And I would also say, as I mentioned in my comments, unlike many higher profile shootings or incidents in the city of Chicago, if you don't see the mayor saying something, you see someone from the administration saying something. Zip, zero, zilch from him. And before I said what I said earlier, I checked with other Jewish community leaders to whom it would be likely that he would reach out to, whether it be in the Orthodox community or other parts of the community. No one has heard from anybody, either him or anybody in his administration, which is shameful. And that's the word you can use in your print. I can spell it too if you need me. That was his joke, not mine. I just said it.
What would it mean to the Jewish community if the mayor spoke out and hate crime charges were filed?
Well, the mayor doesn't have anything to do with hate crimes charges being filed, right? CPD's got to do their investigation, uncover what they're going to uncover, and then work with the state's attorney. Like, we're concerned about the state's attorney's office as well, who announced that, wasn't going to prosecute protesters, dropped charges when charges were actually filed, like in Evanston, for example, against protesters on campus. It's like, so the mayor doesn't necessarily have anything to do with that part. But if the mayor wanted to send a message to the Jewish community, acknowledging what occurred on this past Saturday, reaching out to community members, could be a good start.
I would argue that if he would just do his job and bring the community together and reassure the community that our mayor has our back and is there for us, that would be an amazing thing. But that does not happen.
All right, we'll still be around for another couple minutes if you want to ask questions, but I want to thank you all again for coming, and really appreciate it. Hope the next time we call you here, it'll be for a happy occasion.